The crystalline chamber stretched beyond what human eyes could fully comprehend, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to mock the steady rhythm of Sarah Chen's heartbeat. She stood alone at the center of the amphitheater, her black diplomatic uniform stark against the alien architecture that surrounded her. Above, arranged in concentric circles that spiraled into darkness, sat the representatives of 47 species that comprised the Galactic Council. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since childhood, when humanity first detected the radio signals that proved they weren't alone in the universe. Now, at 35, she carried the weight of 8 billion human lives on her shoulders. The translator implant behind her ear hummed softly, converting the cacophony of alien languages into words she could understand. "The creature speaks of the species called humans," announced Prelate Vorthak, a towering insectoid whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian. His compound eyes fixed on Sarah with the predatory focus of a hunter examining prey. "We have observed your kind for 17 of your planetary rotations. You wage wars over resources that could feed millions. You poison your own atmosphere while your young starve. Tell us, creature, why should the Council grant membership to such a barbaric species?" Sarah felt the collective gaze of dozens of alien minds pressing down on her. She had prepared for hostility, but the casual dismissal in Vorthak's voice struck her like a physical blow. Around the chamber, she could hear the subtle sounds of alien communication. Clicking mandibles, subsonic rumbles, the whisper of tentacles against metal. "Honored Prelate," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Humanity acknowledges our imperfections. We come before you not as a perfect species, but as one capable of growth. In the past century alone, we've reduced global conflict by 70%, established international cooperation protocols, and begun healing the environmental damage of our industrial age." A laugh like grinding stone echoed from the upper levels. High Counselor Zephy's, whose translucent form flickered between dimensions, materialized more solidly to address her. "You speak of growth, yet your military expenditures exceed your scientific research funding by a factor of 12. Your species' first reaction to discovering faster-than-light travel was to weaponize it." "Because we learned caution from our mistakes," Sarah replied, maintaining her composure despite the heat rising in her chest. "Every species in this chamber has a military. The difference is that we're honest about ours." The chamber erupted in a symphony of alien displeasure. Hisses, roars, and sound that had no earthly equivalent. Vorthak's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign Sarah recognized as extreme agitation from her briefing materials. "Honest." The prelate's voice dripped with contempt. "Your species practices deception as naturally as breathing. You've hidden the true extent of your technological advancement, haven't you? The quantum cascade weapons, the neural disruption fields, the... How do you know about classified human technology?" Sarah interrupted, her diplomatic training warring with a growing sense of alarm. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the previous cacophony. Sarah felt the chamber's temperature drop several degrees as alien attention focused on her with laser intensity. Archon Meltiz, a creature that resembled a living crystal formation, spoke with a voice like wind chimes in a hurricane. "The Council has its sources, human. Did you truly believe your species' rapid advancement went unnoticed? Your internet is remarkably easy to infiltrate when one possesses quantum computing capabilities." Sarah's blood turned to ice. If they had access to classified military databases, they knew about Project Prometheus, about the theoretical weapons humanity had developed but never deployed. They knew about the contingency plans, the defensive protocols, the... "We know about your sleeper ships," Vorthak continued, and Sarah's heart stopped entirely. 17 vessels launched in secret over the past decade, each carrying 10,000 of your kind to establish hidden colonies throughout unconquered space. Did you think the Council would allow such aggressive expansion? The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. This wasn't a membership hearing. It was a trial. Humanity wasn't being considered for inclusion in the galactic community. They were being judged as a threat to be eliminated. "The sleeper ships were launched as a precautionary measure," Sarah said carefully, her mind racing through legal precedents and diplomatic protocols. Many species maintain colony vessels as insurance against species like us, Zephyrs interjected, its form flickering with what Sarah interpreted as amusement. How refreshingly honest. Yes, human. Your species prepared for war against us before you even knew we existed. Such foresight, such paranoia, such potential. The way the entity said that last word made Sarah's skin crawl. Around the chamber, she noticed something that chilled her to the bone. The alien representatives weren't just hostile. They were excited. What do you want? Sarah asked, abandoning diplomatic niceties. Vorthak leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow that seemed to reach across the vast distance between them. What we have always wanted: human, order, unity, peace through proper hierarchy. And where exactly do humans fit in this hierarchy? The prelate's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. Wherever we decide to place you, if we decide to place you at all. The threat hung in the air like a blade poised to fall. Sarah understood now why no human delegation had ever returned from council space. This wasn't first contact. It was an execution chamber disguised as a courtroom. But as she stood there, surrounded by beings who viewed her species as either subjects or obstacles to be removed, Sarah Chun felt something unexpected rising in her chest. Not fear, though that was present. Not despair, though the odds were impossible. Fury, pure, clean, righteous anger at the arrogance of creatures who presumed to judge humanity's worth, who spoke of peace while planning genocide, who had violated every principle of diplomatic immunity by spying on and threatening her people. Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked directly into Vorthak's compound eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with perfect clarity. I see. The two words hung in the crystalline air like a challenge thrown down before gods. Sarah felt the weight of 47 civilizations pressing against her mind, their collective attention a crushing force that would have broken lesser individuals. But Ambassador Sarah Chun had not been chosen for this mission because she broke easily. You see, Vorthak repeated, his voice carrying notes of cruel amusement. How wonderfully perceptive. Tell us, human, what exactly do you see? Sarah turned slowly, taking in the full scope of the chamber around her. Tier upon tier of alien forms stretched into the darkness above. Some familiar from the briefing materials, others so bizarre that human language lacked words to describe them. Each species represented here commanded technology that could sterilize Earth's surface within hours. Each possessed weapons that could crack planets like eggs. And each one was staring at her with the cold calculation of a predator. I see a council that has already made its decision, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. I see beings who speak of order and peace while planning the subjugation or elimination of my species. I see creatures who violate diplomatic immunity, who spy on sovereign worlds, who issue threats disguised as questions. The chamber erupted again, but this time Sarah didn't flinch. She had spent 17 years in diplomatic service, from the slums of New Jakarta to the halls of the United Nations. She had faced down warlords and terrorists, dictators and fanatics. The sounds of alien outrage were just noise. Most of all, she continued, raising her voice above the din, I see cowards. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's bioluminescent walls seemed to dim in response to the shocking audacity of her words. High Counselor Zephyrs materialized fully, its translucent form crackling with what appeared to be barely contained energy. Did this primitive just call the Galactic Council cowards? I called you what you are, Sarah replied, her diplomatic training warring with decades of suppressed anger at humanity's treatment by the galaxy at large. 47 species, thousands of years of technological advancement, and you're terrified of one small blue world that just discovered faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. Archon Melthus's crystalline form shifted, creating harmonics that spoke of deep offense. Your species possesses neither the wisdom nor the restraint to wield the power they have stumbled upon. The quantum cascade weapons alone could defend our homes against species that would enslave or destroy us. Sarah interrupted. Yes, we develop weapons. Every species represented here has weapons. The difference is that we developed ours after learning what happened to species that didn't. She gestured toward a section of the upper tiers where several smaller species huddled together, The Vellani, peaceful explorers who made first contact 60 years ago with open arms and open hearts. Where are they now? 3 worlds, reduced to agricultural colonies, serving hegemony interests. The Torth Collective, brilliant scientists who shared their biotechnology freely. Now their surviving populations work in Zephyrian research facilities. The chamber's temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Sarah could feel the rage building around her like a storm preparing to break. But she pressed on. Every species that approached this council with trust and goodwill was either absorbed, eliminated, or reduced to client status. Every single one. So yes, humanity prepared for war. We'd have been fools not to. Vorthak's massive form shifted, his chitinous plates grinding against each other. Your research is impressive, for a primitive, but incomplete. Those species fail because they were weak. The strong survive, the weak serve. This is natural law. Natural law according to whom? Sarah shot back. You speak of strength, but what strength is there in 47 species ganging up on one? What honor is there in threatening genocide against people who haven't even fired a shot? Honor, the word came from Executor Thane, a reptilian being whose scales seem to absorb light itself. Your species speaks of honor, while hiding weapons of mass destruction, while sending secret colony ships to establish militarized outposts. Our colony ships carry civilians, families, children, scientists, artists. They're not military installations. They're backup drives for human civilization, because we know what you do to species that can't defend themselves. Sarah paused, letting her words sink in. Around the chamber, she could see subtle shifts in posture, the alien equivalent of uncomfortable fidgeting. Good. She was getting to them. But here's what really terrifies you, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's not our weapons. It's not our military capabilities. It's not even our stubborn refusal to roll over and die when you point your guns at us. The chamber held its breath. It's that we're not afraid of you anymore. The explosion of outrage that followed was immediate and deafening. Alien voices rose in a cacophony of fury, their translators struggling to convert the flood of threats and condemnation into coherent speech. But through it all, Sarah stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Vorthak's compound gaze. Silence. The prelate's bellow cut through the chaos like a blade. The human wishes to elaborate on her species' lack of fear. Please, Ambassador Chen, educate us. Sarah smiled, not the diplomatic smile she had perfected over years of negotiations, but something colder, more predatory. For decades, humanity wondered if we were alone in the universe. When we discovered we weren't, we prepared for the worst and hoped for the best. We built weapons and defenses, yes, but we also composed music to share with alien minds. We wrote poetry about the beauty of distant stars. We dreamed of friendship among the cosmos. She gestured toward the towering alien forms around her. And then we met you. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. We learned that the galaxy isn't full of diverse civilizations exploring the cosmos together. It's an empire wearing the mask of a council, where might makes right and the strong devour the weak. You've created a universe where species live in fear, where entire civilizations exist only at your sufferance. Sarah's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. But here's what you didn't count on. Humans don't do well with bullies. We never have. Throughout our history, whenever someone tried to tell us we were inferior, whenever they tried to chain us or break us or make us kneel, we've had a habit of proving them wrong. The silence stretched like a wire pulled to its breaking point. So thank you, Galactic Council. Thank you for showing us exactly what we're dealing with. Thank you for revealing your true nature before we wasted any more time on diplomacy. Vorthak leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. And what, precisely, do you intend to do with this revelation, Ambassador? Sarah Chun, representative of humanity, stood alone in the heart of galactic power and smiled. I intend to go home and deliver your message. The crystalline chamber fell into a silence so profound that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat echoing off the alien architecture. 47 species, their combined civilization spanning millennia. stared down a single human woman who had just declared her intention to leave their presence alive, an assumption that suddenly seemed remarkably optimistic. Vorhak's compound eyes reflected the chamber's bioluminescent glow as he studied Sarah with predatory interest. You assume you will be permitted to leave, Ambassador Chun. This is quaint. I assume nothing, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. But I know something about human nature that you clearly don't understand. We're really, really bad at leaving our people behind. A subsonic rumble filled the chamber, the alien equivalent of laughter, but without any warmth. High Counselor Zephy's flickered into greater solidity, its translucent form crackling with energy discharges. One human vessel approaches our territory, the entity said, its voice like wind through broken glass. A diplomatic courier with minimal armament and a crew of 12. Do you truly believe this represents a threat to the combined might of 47 starfaring civilizations? Sarah's smile widened, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she felt genuinely confident. 12 crew members. You've been monitoring human communications for 17 years, and that's the best intelligence you have. The silence that followed carried a different quality, uncertainty rather than menace. Explain, Vorhak commanded, his mandibles clicking rapidly. The ship that brought me here, the UES Defiance, isn't a diplomatic courier. It's a Prometheus-class stealth destroyer carrying a full regiment of Human Defense Corps Marines. Its minimal armament includes quantum cascade warheads, neural disruption fields, and enough firepower to crack a moon. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Around the tiers, alien forms shifted with sudden agitation. Sarah could hear the rapid exchange of communications in languages her translator couldn't parse. Encrypted channels, emergency frequencies, the digital equivalent of panic whispers. You lie, Executor Thane hissed, his obsidian scales rippling with tension. Our sensors detected no such. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Sarah interrupted. You know what the really interesting thing about humans is? We're paranoid. 17 years ago, when we first detected your radio signals, our governments didn't throw parties and compose welcome songs. They convened emergency sessions and asked one simple question. What if they're hostile? She began to pace, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. So we prepared. We developed stealth technology that makes our ships invisible to your sensors. We created weapons that can bypass your shields. We established protocols for scenarios ranging from peaceful contact to total war. And we made sure that any human who left Earth carried a means to defend themselves. Archon Melthus's crystalline form generated a series of discordant tones. Even if your claims are accurate, one ship cannot stand against the Council's fleet. One ship, no, Sarah agreed. But here's another thing about humans. We're really good at keeping secrets. How many ships do you think we've actually built? How many are already positioned throughout Council space, waiting for a signal? The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien voices rose in urgent consultation, their translators working overtime to convert panic into comprehensible speech. Emergency lights began flashing in patterns Sarah didn't recognize, and she could feel the subtle vibration of defensive systems activating throughout the massive structure. Silence. Vorhak's bellow cut through the noise like a blade. The human seeks to sow discord with baseless claims. Even if her species has managed to position vessels within our territory, they would not dare to act. The consequences would be mutual annihilation, Sarah finished. Yes, Prelate, we understand the stakes. But that's exactly why this conversation is so interesting. She stopped pacing and faced the assembled council directly. You've spent this entire session threatening humanity with extinction. You've made it clear that our choices are submission or death. You've revealed that you've been spying on us, that you violated our sovereignty, that you view my entire species as either slaves or obstacles to be removed. Her voice grew stronger, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. But now you're worried about the consequences of our actions. Why? If you truly hold overwhelming advantage, if humanity is nothing more than an upstart species with delusions of grandeur, then what difference does it make how many ships we have hidden in the dark? The silence stretched like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Unless, Sarah continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You're not as secure in your position as you pretend to be. High Counselor Zephy's flickered with what might have been rage. Your species has existed in space for mere decades. The Council has maintained order for over 3,000 years. We have conquered species with technology that makes your crude weapons seem primitive by comparison. And yet here you are, calling an emergency session because one human woman hurt your feelings. Sarah shot back. Tell me, Counselor, how many other primitive species have managed to infiltrate your space undetected? How many have developed weapons you can't counter? How many have refused to kneel when you pointed your guns at them? The answer was written in the sudden stillness of 47 alien civilizations. None, Sarah said, answering her own question. We're the first, aren't we? The first species to look at your grand Galactic Council and say no thank you to your protection racket. Vorthack's massive form shifted, his chitinous plates grinding against each other. Your bravado is admirable human, but ultimately meaningless. Even if your species possesses more advanced technology than we initially suspected, you remain vastly outnumbered. A war against the Council would result in humanity's complete annihilation. Probably, Sarah agreed, but not certainly. And that uncertainty is what really scares you. She gestured toward the tiers of alien representatives. Every species in this chamber submitted to your authority because resistance seemed hopeless. They looked at your combined might and made the rational choice to surrender rather than face extinction. But humans aren't always rational, are we? Her smile turned predatory. We have a saying on Earth, if you want peace, prepare for war. But there's another one you might find more relevant. It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. The chamber's bioluminescent walls pulsed faster, responding to the electromagnetic chaos of alien emotional states. Sarah could feel the fear beginning to permeate the vast space. Not fear of humanity's military capabilities, but fear of something far more dangerous. Uncertainty. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through the simple expedient of overwhelming force. Species submitted because resistance was hopeless. They accepted client status because the alternative was extinction. But what happened when a species refused to accept those terms? What happened when someone was willing to fight even if they couldn't win? You want to know the real difference between humans and every other species you conquered? Sarah asked, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We've been preparing for this conversation our entire lives. The admission hit the chamber like a shockwave. Sarah watched as the implications rippled through 47 civilizations, each alien mind processing the terrifying possibility that humanity had been planning for war since their first moment of contact with galactic civilization. Vorthack's compound eyes fixed on her with laser intensity. Explain. Every human child grows up learning about the wars of our past, Sarah said, her voice carrying with absolute confidence. We study the tactics that defeated superior forces, the strategies that turned hopeless situations into victories. We memorize the names of leaders who chose death before dishonor, who fought impossible odds because surrender meant something worse than annihilation. She gestured toward the assembled council. When our radio telescopes first detected your signals, our military analysts didn't celebrate. They asked questions. How would we fight an enemy with superior technology? How would we resist occupation? How would we make conquest so costly that even victory would feel like defeat? The chamber's temperature continued to drop as defensive systems throughout the structure came online. Sarah could hear the subtle hum of energy weapons charging, the whisper of shield generators spinning up to full power. The council was preparing for war while still seated in their judgment hall. Impossible, Executor Thane hissed, his obsidian scales rippling with agitation. No species could maintain such preparation for decades without detection. Every democracy on Earth maintains civilian militias, Sarah replied. Every child learns basic survival skills in school. Every university has programs in applied physics, chemistry, and engineering. We didn't build a secret army. We built a secret civilization where every citizen is a potential soldier. High Counselor Zephy's flicker between dimensions, its form becoming increasingly unstable. The resources required for such preparation would be astronomical. Your economic models could not support. Our economic models were designed around the assumption of eventual conflict, Sarah interrupted. While you were monitoring our military spending, did you notice our investment in education, our focus on distributed manufacturing, our redundant communication networks? The silence stretched like a blade poised to fall. Every human colony carries a complete technological base needed to rebuild our civilization from scratch. Every settlement can manufacture its own weapons, communications equipment, and defensive systems. You can't conquer humanity by taking our capital worlds, because we don't have any single points of failure. Archon meld has generated a series of discordant harmonics. Even with such preparation, your species cannot match the Council's combined military might. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics assume conventional warfare, Sarah said, cutting through the crystal being's protestations. Ship-to-ship combat, territorial control, resource denial. But humans don't fight conventional wars when we're losing. She began pacing again, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. We fight asymmetric campaigns. We use guerrilla tactics. We turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses and make every victory so costly that defeat becomes preferable. The bioluminescent walls pulse faster, responding to the electromagnetic chaos of 47 species simultaneously accessing their military databases, running combat simulations, calculating casualty projections for conflicts they had never imagined fighting. Consider the logistics, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The Council maintains order across how many star systems? Thousands? Tens of thousands? How many garrison forces would you need to occupy that much territory against a distributed resistance network? Vorthack's mandibles clicked rapidly. You speak of resistance as if defeat is inevitable. This confidence seems misplaced for a species facing such overwhelming odds. Does it? Sarah asked, stopping her pacing to face the prelate directly. Because from where I'm standing, those odds don't look quite as overwhelming as they did an hour ago. The chamber fell silent except for the subtle humming of defensive systems and the rapid exchange of encrypted communications. When this session began, you were confident enough to threaten humanity with extinction. You spoke of natural law, of the strong devouring the weak, of our inevitable submission to your authority. But now, Sarah gestured toward the tiers of alien representatives, many of whom were engaged in urgent consultations with unseen advisors. Now you're running combat simulations. You're calculating resource requirements for extended military campaigns. You're trying to determine whether the cost of conquest would exceed the benefits of simply leaving us alone. The truth of her words was evident in the electromagnetic chaos surrounding them. Fear had a distinctive signature, regardless of species, and the chamber reeked of it. That, Sarah said, her voice dropping to just above a whisper, is the sound of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the beginning of wisdom. High Counselor Zephyrs materialized more solidly, its form crackling with barely contained energy. Even if your species can inflict significant casualties, the ultimate outcome remains unchanged. Humanity would be destroyed. Probably, Sarah agreed, but the Council would be weakened. Other species would see that resistance is possible, that the price of subjugation can be made unacceptably high. How many client species are watching this session? How many are calculating whether they could follow humanity's example? The silence that followed was deafening. That's the real reason you're afraid, Sarah continued. Not because humanity could defeat you in open war, but because we can inspire others to try. We could prove that the Council's authority depends on consent, not just force. And consent, once withdrawn, is very difficult to restore. She walked to the center of the chamber, directly beneath the towering alien forms. So here's my proposal, since we all seem to understand the stakes now. Humanity withdraws its application for Council membership. We maintain our current territorial boundaries and make no aggressive moves against Council space. In exchange, you formally recognize our sovereignty and cease all intelligence operations against human worlds. Vorthack leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. And if the Council refuses these terms? Sarah Chun, Ambassador Humanity, stood alone before a combined might of galactic civilization and smiled. Then you get exactly what you asked for at the beginning of this session. The prelate's compound eyes reflected the chamber's chaotic lighting, which is war. The word hung in the crystalline air like a death sentence, reverberating through the vast chamber with impossible weight. Sarah watched as 47 civilizations processed the implications of humanity's ultimatum, their collective silence more deafening than any explosion. Vorthak's massive form remained perfectly still, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's chaotic bioluminescence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note Sarah had not heard before: respect. You would condemn your entire species to extinction rather than accept a subordinate position in the galactic order. I would honor their choice to remain free, Sarah corrected. Every human who volunteered for colony ships knew they might never see Earth again. Every citizen who supported our military buildup understood they were preparing for a war we might not survive. We made these choices collectively, democratically, with full understanding of the consequences. She gestured toward the assembled council. Can you say the same? How many of your member species chose their current status? How many were given alternatives other than submission or death? The silence stretched until High Counselor Zephy's flickered into greater solidity. The galaxy requires order, human. Chaos serves no one's interests. Whose order? Sarah shot back. Yours? The hegemonies? The strongest species in any given generation? Order imposed through forces and order. It's tyranny with better public relations. Executor Thane's obsidian scales rippled with agitation. Your species speaks of freedom while building weapons of mass destruction. You condemn our methods while preparing for genocide. We prepare for defense, Sarah replied. There's a difference between building weapons to conquer and building them to survive. Every human weapon system is defensive in nature, designed to make invasion costly, not to facilitate expansion. Semantic distinctions. Archon Meltas chimed, its crystalline form generating discordant harmonics. The dead care little whether they were killed by defensive or offensive weapons. True, Sarah agreed. But the living care very much about the difference between dying free and living as slaves. The chamber's defensive systems continued their low humming, a technological heartbeat that underscored the tension permeating the vast space. Sarah could feel the weight of galactic history pressing down on her. 3,000 years of conquest and submission, of species choosing survival over sovereignty. But she could also feel something else, something that gave her strength. Throughout the tiers of alien representatives, she noticed subtle shifts in posture, the electromagnetic signatures of minds reconsidering long-held assumptions. Not all the council's members were comfortable with the direction this session had taken. Honored representatives, Sarah said, raising her voice to address the entire assembly, I ask you to consider what you've learned today. Humanity stands ready to fight a war we cannot win rather than accept subjugation. We've spent decades preparing for this moment, transforming our entire civilization into something that cannot be easily conquered or controlled. She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many alien forms as possible. But more importantly, we've demonstrated that resistance is possible, that species don't have to choose between submission and extinction, that there's a third option, making conquest so costly that it becomes undesirable. The bioluminescent walls pulsed faster as communication traffic spiked throughout the chamber. Emergency consultations, strategic assessments, political calculations, the mathematics of empire suddenly becoming far more complex. Some of you represent species that joined the council willingly, Sarah continued. Others were conquered and absorbed. But all of you have watched as potential threats were eliminated or neutralized before they could mature into genuine opposition. Her voice grew stronger, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Today you've seen something new, a species that reached technological maturity while maintaining its independence, a civilization that chose preparation over appeasement, resistance over submission. We've proven that the Council's authority is not absolute, that its power has limits. Vorthak's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. Impressive rhetoric, Ambassador Chun, but ultimately meaningless if your species is reduced to radioactive ash. Is it? Sarah asked. Because I notice you haven't given that order yet. The council has been in session for over 2 hours, and in all that time, No one has suggested simply destroying Earth and being done with it. Why is that? The silence that followed was profound. Because you know that killing us won't solve your real problem, Sarah continued. The knowledge that resistance is possible will survive even if we don't. Other species will study our example, adapt our strategies, improve on our methods. You can destroy humanity, but you can't destroy the idea of freedom. She walked back to the center of the chamber, directly beneath the assembled might of galactic civilization. So here we are. Humanity offers a council a choice. Recognize our sovereignty and accept that some species will choose independence over membership or face the consequences of a war that will weaken everyone involved. High Counselor Zephy's flickered with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. And if we choose the former? If the Council recognizes human independence? What precedent does that establish for other species? The precedent that freedom is possible for those willing to pay its price, Sarah replied without hesitation. That species have choices beyond submission and extinction. That the galaxy is big enough for multiple models of civilization. Executor Thane's scales rippled with obvious displeasure. Such recognition would undermine the Council's authority, potentially destabilizing the existing order. The existing order is already destabilized, Sarah pointed out. The question is whether you adapt to new realities or try to maintain control through increasingly costly applications of force. The chamber fell silent, except for the subtle sounds of alien deliberation. Sarah stood alone at the center of galactic power, a single human woman who had walked into the heart of empire and demanded equality rather than mercy. Finally, Vorhak spoke, his voice carrying across the vast space with absolute authority. The Council will consider humanity's proposal. You will remain in Council space while we deliberate. No, Sarah said simply. The temperature in the chamber dropped another 10 degrees. I'm sorry, the prelate asked, his compound eyes reflecting genuine surprise. I said no. I'm leaving. You can deliver your decision to Earth through normal diplomatic channels. But I won't sit in a gilded cage while you decide whether my species lives or dies. She turned toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Ambassador Chin, Vorthak called after her, and something in his voice made her pause. Yes. Your species' preparation for this encounter was indeed impressive. But tell me, what makes you so certain you will be permitted to leave this chamber alive? Sarah Chun, representative of 8 billion human souls, turned back to face the assembled might of 47 civilizations and smiled. Because if I don't return to my ship in exactly 47 minutes, Captain Rodriguez has orders to broadcast a very interesting message to every human colony in the galaxy. A message that begins with the words, "You wanted war? You got it." The silence that followed her departure was absolute, and in that silence, the balance of galactic power shifted forever.